want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
We are the Mad Men of Masculinity.
Your home for healthy masculinity. We're just real men having real conversations for you.
Good day, Mad Men Mafia.
Hey, I am Kirk M. Samuels.
And I am Jason B. Kendrick.
And we are the Mad Men of Masculinity.
That's right. We're just real men having real conversations for you.
For y'all.
It's on today, folks.
Yeah. It's on like Donkey Kong. I used to like Donkey Kong.
I still like Donkey Kong. I mean, I like those retro games. I feel, brings back my youth, little inner child, healing there. Let's go play the old games. Bring me back to my youth,
We got a Donkey Kong on with us today for some conversation, man. I hope you don't get offended that I called him a Donkey Kong.
Yeah, he might punch you in the head.
I don't know. We'll ask him, man. But he's like the big guy at the top is what I'm going for.
He is. He's our closer. He's our ringer. He gives us all the credibility in the world.
Indeed.
Is he eighth degrees or ninth degrees now?
No way, man. No way. That was old school, man. Bring him on here. Let's introduce him.
All right, sir. The one, the only, Master Chris Natzke.
One and only. See, at one point in time, he was a white belt. And a black belt is nothing but a white belt that never quit. Woo. And see, I pay attention, man. Way back in the day, Grandmaster J.K. Lee saw a young Padawan and a young grasshopper and saw something special in this guy, man. And today, 50 something years later, or close to anyway, our guest is a freaking 9th degree black belt, man. I mean, 9. He don't get the last degree till he die. The one and only Grandmaster Chris Natzke, the guy himself, man, the legend, the myth. You never seen one, now you have seen one, man. Hey, I said we're on like Donkey Kong. I kind of called you a Donkey Kong before we came on here, but what I meant was you the big guy at the top. I didn't mean you were a big gorilla, Nats.
I appreciate that.
Well, right, I'm sure if you take him off and you call him late for dinner, he could get a little gorilla-ish. But most time he's pretty cute level. You're pretty zen-like most of the time, which we really appreciate. You keep us all kind of there.
All right, right on,
man. If our little crew is the A team, you'd be Hannibal. Mm-hmm. You'd be the one with the wisdom. You'd be the one with probably the most gray hair. But at least you got hair. Some of us don't have hair, but
there you go.
Either way, man, you definitely, you definitely one of the deepest dudes I know. You're 127 years old, but you only look about 60.
Thank you.
And you do your thing, man. We appreciate you, man. You are closing out you the big hitter this year at the B Men Summit, man. The Men's Summit, Parker, Colorado. If you're in the Denver area, August 23rd, Parker, Colorado, the Parker Schoolhouse. bmen.org/summit is where you get the tickets. But you bring like the anchor, man. We handing the baton off to you, and you bringing it home with the kick, man, with the stride, literally with the kick.
That's the intention, guys. That's the intention. I just hope everyone sticks around till the end. So that's what I'm hoping.
Well, we're gonna have to, we might have to have you guarding the door. I mean,
there we go.
First, so we gotta have you on the door to keep everybody inside. I don't want to scare them all away, but if you guys are coming, if you do already have your tickets, make sure you stay till the end, because I've seen this man a couple times. Kirk's seen him a whole bunch of times, and it's always worth it. You always get something out of it. You always leave better than you got there. So, don't leave early. Don't leave at lunch and dip out, because you can miss the best.
You probably are one of the best speakers I know personally. One of the best speakers that I've been in front of and a part of, and it's an honor to be in the same conversation on the same stage and just in life with you, man. You got such a deep sense of wisdom. I mean, man, you got just a depth of knowledge that most people don't have. Experiences, you've done what is it called, the Camino, something, something. You've done that, man. I pay attention, man. When I pay attention when Nat speaks, man. I just do.
Speaking of when Nat speaks, I mean, let's quit blowing sunshine up his behind and doing all the neon dance because he's all that in a bag of chips. But we got to get to the show. So
Yeah, we do.
Natzke. This year you're talking about the masculine paradox.
Yeah.
What is the masculine paradox?
Well, the way that I define it, Jason, is, we have as men attributes, characteristics that from a very early age have been part of what's been instilled in us. Big boys don't cry. You need to be strong. You need to do it yourself. You can't show emotion. And interestingly enough, sometimes that serves men really well. It serves us to be resilient. It serves us to be strong. It serves us to be able to be in control of our emotions. But on the other side of that coin is if we are doing that and showing up in that way at the expense of us being able to show our true feelings, being able to reach out when we're in need of help, being able to ask for the help of our friends and our family members when we're in time of need. And when vulnerability will really serve us, but we decide to avoid it at all costs because we think we're going to be weak. Now, all of a sudden, those attributes don't serve us. Hence the paradox, right? Those are things that work well in our lives. They're things that can serve us. And if that's all we rely on and we're not able to tap in to that place within inside of ourselves that can grow, that can heal, that can be strong enough to ask for help, then it doesn't serve us. So that's in essence what I call the masculine paradox.
I love it because it's definitely something we need to talk about more often. And especially, I mean, if you have ever been in the dating scene, especially in the last 15, 20 years, ask a lady what she wants in a man. And you talk about paradoxical. He's got to be strong, but not too strong. He's got to be smart, but not overbearing. He's got to be a gentleman, but also a bad boy. He's got to be 6 feet, but also gentle. He's got, all these just paradoxical kind of back and forth thinking and descriptions. And it's like most guys are like, well, what do you want? What do I do? And so I love the fact that you're having that.
It brings us into a real state of confusion, right? And where we tend to move to is this place of isolation, where we're not going to ask for anything. We're just going to go through it ourselves, because the last thing we want to be as men is to appear weak, right? When I teach my self-defense seminars, we talk about this dichotomy between men and women and people who are possibly targets for attack, right? And for a woman, it may be that she's bitchy, right? That's the best way to insult a woman, right? But for us, it's to be called weak. It's to be called, feminine. It's to be called pussy, excuse me, guys, right? It's those types of things that come forward. So at all costs, what we do is we try to avoid those things. And what ends up happening is the deeper we go into that hole, the more isolated we become, and the more less power, the less strength that we actually show. The more that we try to resist it, the weaker we become. So it becomes this dichotomy, and you wake up after, years, decades and go, who am I? And you don't even know the strength you have inside yourself because you've been so intent on hiding your weaknesses.
Wow. You talk about who am I? When you get to be a man in this Western culture, you realize that nobody told you, for most of us, the day we became a man, right. And or what that means in any kind of holistic way. Most of us didn't have a healthy image, role model, standard, whatever you want to call it, a bar to measure ourselves against. Yeah. A lot of us have found ourselves one day looking up and we have maybe a wife, kids, but nobody told us what a husband or a man or a father is. And so we stumble our way through these relationships, through this journey called life as a quote unquote man. But we don't know what that is, to your point. And we don't know how to navigate that thing. And, man, I've experienced, and I'll I'll get vulnerable when we get back from a break coming up here in a little bit. But yeah, when you get into that question mark of who I am, man, it's like I don't know who I am sometimes or who I'm supposed to be. And I figure culture kind of set me up that way, but also culture kind of judges me for being that way.
Yeah, 100%. And, and I'll be sharing part of my talk, generally our first male role models in our lives, generally speaking, is our fathers, right? And I'll speak more about the role model that my father provided for me. And in looking back now as an adult man and having been a father, I can see where he really struggled with some of these attributes and really passed them on to me. And it's something that I needed to overcome. And, you both have heard my story before, how martial arts helped transform and save me in that way. And I think what I've come to the realization is my father, in many ways, was able to teach me how to become the man I wanted to be, the father, the husband, etc. Not because he gave me the example to follow, but because he provided an example for me to say, I don't want to follow that way. Now, you can argue that both of those could be beneficial, but what most of us do, and I grew up in an alcoholic household, which I'll share at the summit, most people will, or most men in particular, will either follow that path or they'll do the exact opposite. And that's just kind of how we tend to relate to it. So the idea is how can we take our past? How can we understand that masculine paradox that was basically ingrained from us from birth? And how can we identify it and transcend it?
Yeah, it's one of those things, especially doing men's work, that we really run into. And a lot of guys not sure who to be or how to be or what it means to be a man nowadays. And then, of course, especially nowadays, a lot of times, no matter which path you choose, you're still going to be wrong. Just depends on which lady you ask. So having a good, strong foundation and doing the work to look at your past, your parents, so doing the work to look inward and find out who your unique self is and have that foundation so that when you are wrong, you're not blown over. You're not subject to the winds of fate in that way where you have your foundation and you know who you are. That's one of the reasons we do the men's summit. It's one of the reasons we have Be Men. One of the reasons we all get together so that we can share our unique perspectives on that so that each man comes away with his own unique takeaway. Right. And that's the reason we do the summit every year. That's the reason we get together. And that's the reason we have Grandmaster Chris Natzke coming on and finishing the show, because if you guys want to have a nugget to take away with you, if you didn't get something from all the other speakers, which I know you will, but for some reason you didn't, you'll definitely get something from him. And so when we get back from this break, we're going to really dig into a little more of the masculine paradox and how to be the foundational man you need to be to weather the storms of life. So we'll be right back. We are the Mad Men of Masculinity. This is KLDC. See you in a minute. I was 30 seconds early, but it's like didn't have anything else to say.
You're about right on from the live time.
Yeah,
30 seconds from the intro, but you were.
So you guys have a commercial played right now?
No, we're still live on YouTube and Facebook, but
yeah, YouTube and Facebook, we they keep the stream going, but when we turn the audio over to our producer for the radio, he'll edit out all this part and put in all the other stuff. So when we take a break here, don't pick your nose because everybody on Facebook or YouTube is still going to see.
Okay, good. So this wasn't a good thing to do.
No,
it's okay. Just don't dig deep.
All right, good.
Just don't pull out nothing.
Yeah, keep it in there. Keep it in
pull
there.
out all the stuff.
If you don't pull out nothing, it's a scratch. If you pull out something, it's a dig.
Okay, all right.
No digging on camera.
Nah, no digging. No, you can
right,
dig
you
it.
ready?
Dig for it. Yeah. We're back.
Yes, we're back.
Mad Men of Masculinity, KLDC, 12:20 a.m. in the Mile High City and on the interwebs everywhere. I mean, you can go to Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, I mean, anywhere you can get a podcast stream. I mean, madmenradio.com, man. We just doing our thing, man. We just two regular guys out here just doing our thing, just trying to do something positive. It costs you absolutely zero to hit a button, to engage, to love or like or dislike or heart or comment saying you guys are stupid or I agree or disagree or whatever it is. But y'all know the deal. You know the rhythms, the algorithms, and all that kind of stuff. The more people engage, the more it'll show other people. And speaking of regular guys, that when we're at the summit, we are just regular guys. I mean, we all of us are speakers in some aspect. I mean, all of us have spoken on multiple stages, and to some degree probably have gotten paid to speak, and some more than others. But in any case, we are just normal guys, and we go through all the ups and downs of life, all the challenges and all those kinds of things. And Nat's one of the things you said, and we, those of us that are I'll say kind of putting on the summit, meaning sponsoring, hosting, kind of putting it together, organizing. We all live in a circle. We all live in a pack. Like we know each other outside of this. Like we literally live life together. In all of those things. And one of the things that you said just in this last segment, was, it drives us to loneliness and isolation. And, and we get off kind of in these spaces where we deal with things by ourselves. And, a moment of vulnerability and transparency, when you said that, it struck a chord, because even amongst us, like lately, man, I mean, I've been getting my butt kicked and nuts crunched in, and holding that, carrying that, not really even wanting to share it with the guys closest to me. One, because I don't want you guys to think I'm weak. Two, because I don't want you guys to ask me about it a lot stuff, because I don't have answers, I don't have solutions. So I don't want you to come to me with a bunch of questions I don't have solutions for. And then I just don't want to, talk about the stuff that's kicking me in the butt lately any more than I have to. And so, prime example of what you just said in terms of this paradox. Like I feel like, not to make the conversations about me, but to relate to what you just said, feeling like I need to carry the weight of what life is putting on me right now. But at the same time, that driving me to a place of kind of isolation and cut off, because of this paradox that, man, am I really equipped for this? Am I really, can I do this? And even though I got friends to help me, and I live like that, and I believe in that, I still fall into that trap of isolation and kind of doing things on my own. So, man, when you said that, it just kind of struck a chord in me, and I believe you're totally right on that.
Yeah, and I think, Kirk, we're all in it. I mean, I go through that as well too. I mean, I've got the big image of the big martial art master. It's got it all this stuff, all this poop in a group, and everything is fine. And trust me, it's not that way. And I think that some of the most profound leaders that I've been around, men of strength, women of strength too, for that matter, but men of strength, character, integrity, the best leaders I've been are able to have that balance. And because, when we are able to share our vulnerability and share that we have challenges that we're going through as well, we make ourselves more relatable to the people that we're leading, to the people that we're serving, to the people that we're interacting with. And when we do that, we give them permission to do the same. And, so much of this becomes this, I'm going to talk a little bit about this during my talk, what Lewis Howe calls the mask of masculinity. Right? We think we have to have this mask, and we have to have this armor that we have at all times. And the fact of the matter is it gets pretty heavy after a while. Sometimes you got to lay it down. Sometimes you have to be able to connect with other men in particular to be able to share that. Because I think that sometimes what can help us the most is just knowing that the other guy across the chair or table or room is going through something similar. And we don't feel like we're all alone, right? Because that's where we can really tap into each other's strength and our support. But we never get to that place if we're not able to share authentically and share without self-consciousness, if you will. You know what I'm saying? I think that sometimes what holds us back is, like you said, we're going to appear weak, or what are they going to think of me, et cetera, et cetera. And there's just too many examples of men that have gone down a road that's really harmful to them and all the people around them, just because they decided they've got to hold up an image.
I'm so glad you used the word authenticity, because I mean, that's something I'll bring up in my talk as well, but it's something that's at the core of men nowadays, is that to be the strongest version of yourself, to be foundational, to be the best man you can be, you have to be authentic. which means facing those fears, which means being vulnerable. And it's, I mean, every time we get on stage, we're vulnerable. Every time we write a book, we're vulnerable. Every time we do a podcast, we're being vulnerable. We're sharing things that most of us would rather not share in, day-to-day life. But it's like, you have to build this muscle of vulnerability so that you can be authentic. And we talked about it before, that authenticity is actually more powerful. Everybody says that love is the most powerful emotion. Love is the most powerful frequency. But they've done the research at the Heart Math Institute that authenticity is so much more powerful than love. And I did a little digging and a little kind of like my own investigation. And it just seems to me that the reason authenticity is so much more powerful is because it's rooted in self-love. It's rooted in self-forgiveness. Right. It's rooted in being who you truly are, no matter what's going on around you. And so having guys around you that can accept you and you can accept yourself and be vulnerable and authentic with is very powerful. If you don't have those guys, I would suggest coming to the summit, because I guarantee you'll meet some of those guys there.
Well, it's interesting, Jason, you bring up the word heart, which I just thought I'd share this real quickly. We talk about oftentimes the idea of courage, right? And we've probably all heard by now this idea that courage isn't the lack of fear, it's having fear and moving through it anyway. But the other thing that I always like to share at times with audiences when it's appropriate is this idea of courage. And many of us, probably more successful than others, took Spanish and or French in high school, at least, right? I waited till college, and man, that all those 2 years, all I wished was I had taken it in high school, so I wasn't so far behind. But what was so interesting, if you look at the word courage, and you look at the word heart, say in French, it's coeur. So courage, it's coming from your heart. There's some real strength and, courage, if you will, and braveness that happens when we speak from our heart. And many times as men, we don't do that. We feel that that's a weakness. And, I think that's one of the greatest senses of relief that I've been able to have, is just when I am able to share from that perspective. And then it's like, whoa, because the more we resist it, the more we're going to weaken ourselves. Does that make sense? The more we've got it there and we suppress it down. And, there's a great book called Why Good People Do Bad Things by Debbie Ford. And she makes the analogy of people who are resisting their shadow side, if you will. And she makes the analogy of it's like a beach ball that you're trying to hold underwater. And you try and pretty soon it's just going to erupt, right? It's going to break the surface of the water. And it's the same thing when we're not dealing with our stuff. It's going to come out. It has to. And so it either goes into dis-ease in our bodies, or it goes into our emotional state, or it gets projected onto other people. And then it tends to, have a negative impact on our relationships and in both our work and also personal relationships. So being able to confront that and deal with it and embrace it all at the same time, that takes a tremendous amount of courage.
Wow. I got a pretty benign text when I was leaving the gym this morning, and it was a text about my slides for the summit. And why are you laughing, man? I wasn't going to say it was you.
Who would have said that?
I wasn't going to say it was you, man. I was just going to say.
Don't feel bad. I got one of those texts too.
But again, the vulnerability, true honesty, man. When I got that text, it pissed me off. It pissed me off because, first of all, because I'm late, and it was my fault and for being late and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, man, I'm trying to hold it together, man. I don't care about no blankety blank slides and, texting me first thing in the morning, and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. And, but my reply to the text was, pretty straightforward. Give me a day or two or whatever it was. And I just basically, I put on the front, the mask that you were talking about. And then like a minute later, when I was at a stoplight, I looked in my rearview mirror, and the lady behind me was driving, doing this whole thing in the mirror as she was driving behind me. And I'm like, and the wires crossed, and I'm like, she's putting on mascara. She's literally putting on a mask. And I started judging this lady for putting on a mask. And then it hit me like, dude, I mean, you putting on a mask yourself, man. I mean, maybe you need to look in your own rearview mirror, because you driving around this morning putting on a mask. And I mean, as a guy, maybe ours is not, mask in terms of comes out of a bottle or a tube and we put it on our face. But absolutely, the way we present that thing to the world around us, especially the people around us, can be just as much as a mask as the lady doing her makeup, in the rearview mirror. She's driving behind me, ready to rear end me as soon as anything stops.
Amen, brother. Amen. Well, you speak to something I think that's very powerful and I think you experienced it this morning I had a teacher tell me many years ago that awareness is the first step in transformation. So if we're not aware of what's going on, if we're not aware that we've got opportunities for growth, if we're not aware of what the source is of our pain and of our discomfort, et cetera, then we're just going to continue to spin our wheels, or we're going to project it on other people, right? Because most of the time when we're feeling that anger, that frustration, that depression, all that kind of stuff, we're not angry at what's going outside of ourselves. We're angry at ourselves, right? So that awareness, and it be based on the fact that we're human beings, we're always going to be continuing through that journey. But I think hopefully where we want to get is that we can start recognizing that sooner and work on it sooner so that we're able to cycle through and live a much happier and healthy life.
Yeah, acknowledgement, awareness. It's the first step for a reason in all the 12 steps. You have to acknowledge where you're at, where your presence is, and what you're dealing with. And I think that's a lot of times when we wear those masks, that's why we suffer so much without acknowledgement, because we're covering it up, we're soothing it, we're doing all the things to trying to keep that beach ball under the water versus allowing to come up and facing it. And speaking of facing, it's time for us to face our second break. We're the Mad Men of Masculinity. This is KLDC. We'll be right back.
I wasn't gonna say where that text came from.
Somebody's feeling guilty. He's like, he's probably feeling like, yeah, I gotta crack the whip. What?
I wasn't gonna say nothing. I was just gonna keep it pretty.
At least you got back to me. I got guys that still haven't responded to that text.
Yeah.
Oh, so we're not the only ones. So everybody's.
You're not the only ones. Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
Good.
Ken Curry had it on time. I got him on Thursday or Friday from old Ken.
At least we got one.
Yeah.
Well, there's
we'll have them by the time.
Yeah, there's one of us that either got his poop in a group or he ain't got nothing else to do but to get his slides in on time.
I ain't gonna say which because we don't know, but
we love Ken. All right.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
Yeah. We're back.
Yes, we're back.
We are back with the Mad Men Masculinity KLDC 1220 AM Mile High City. I think the antenna is somewhere up off of Lookout Mountain, broadcasting over all the airwaves in the Rocky Mountain region. Millions upon millions, probably, of square miles. I don't know. I just made that up. Probably ain't true, but it's a lot. It's a lot of square feet, put it that way. And today, man, we having, some deep talks. We're getting vulnerable, getting personal. We got the human fortune cookie, 9th degree black belt Grandmaster Chris Natzke, one of our guys, on today, and talking about just the paradox of masculinity, the paradox of being a man. Do you think this is a Western culture thing, or do you think this is just a global? I mean, you know people, from different cultures and that kind of stuff. Do you think that's a Western thing?
Boy, that's a really good question. I haven't really thought about that, Kirk. I think that my sense is yes, and or we're just more aware of it here. And it might be that people are dealing with it, and they're just not aware of it in other cultures. I think that masculinity does take different forms in different cultures, but I think we have a dynamic too in the United States where the female roles are different than it might be in other cultures as well. So there's a dichotomy that occurs there, but I haven't really given that much thought. That's an interesting thing. When I think about martial arts, of course, in an Asian influence, Korean, particularly in my perspective, there was always, one of our main tenets was called Pilsung. It still is. And the Korean translation of that is certain victory, right? So think about that. Now, again, there is a tremendous value to that. When you're up against it and you know that you're going to dig deep and find something inside of you to get through obstacles and get through challenges, it's one of the most, profound things we can get access to in our lives. And if we're doing it at the expense of ourselves, then it becomes a problem. And that's probably been one of the dichotomies in my life. Again, living this discipline, since I was a little boy, a little chubby kid, back in the early 70s, right, Kirk? Wasn't like around the time you were born, something like that?
Exactly. You started martial arts the year I was born.
So anyway, it's like, how do I balance that? How do I balance that? And I've definitely gone through that in my life, and questioned that. And, also, where is it appropriate for me to lean into my power too? I think about my marriage when I was married, on how some of the power I abdicated because I thought that was going to be, I was going to be the nice guy. I was going to be the supportive husband, et cetera, et cetera. And I really found out that was not the most powerful way for me to show up. So I think it's a learning thing, right? I think that we're constantly, it's like on a bicycle. We're constantly trying to balance ourselves. And I think it's super important. Years ago, I watched a guy giving a talk. He was a street performer back in San Francisco who had transformed into a keynote speaker, and he was excellent. He was one of those buskers that did the juggling and whatever. And during the course of his talk, he looked at the lectern that was up there. He had not been using up until this time. It was a lectern. It was plexiglass. He goes, I've been thinking about this for a while. And he goes over to the lectern and he puts his hands on it. All of a sudden, he pops into a handstand on the lectern. Now it's plexiglass, so it's a little bit wobbly, right? And he's in this, this handstand. He says, most of us always think that we need to constantly work on work-life balance. That there's some place out there we're going to be totally balanced. He goes, but look at my hands. He goes, I'm constantly moving. The weight is distributing from one finger to the next. He goes, I'm never going to be balanced. I'm always going to be balancing. And I think that's what we are as men. We're constantly going to be balancing between being in our power and being in and overcoming those things and dealing with our vulnerability and our ability to stand up and be courageous. It's a work in progress. Hey, if it wasn't, we probably wouldn't need to be here anymore, right? So that's why we're here.
Yeah, I love that. I think,
is that why guys self-cancel?
Say that again.
Is that why guys tap out and quit and self-cancel? Because they don't realize that it's a constant balancing thing?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. Because I think if we are in a constant state of feeling that we need to be perfect and be that perfect representation of masculinity, there's no way we're ever going to hit it, right? It's like the distinction I make in martial arts. We don't strive for perfection, but we strive for excellence, right? And excellence means that you're going to have times when you're not hitting the mark, but it doesn't mean you don't strive for it. But at the same time, part of that realization of excellence is accepting the fact that we're human and we are going to have our faults. We are going to go off center, but it's about getting back on and getting on that straight and narrow when we can.
Sounds like a bit of progress over perfection, which I think is probably the best way to go. As long as you're making progress, whether it's one step or 100 steps, as long as you're moving forward. I mean, and to the just while listening to you talk and after Kirk's question, I thought maybe it's not a Western problem. Maybe it's a first world problem. Maybe the reason we have such a masculine paradox in the West and the first world is that we're so far away from the traditional masculine feminine roles and survival that we're kind of like, well, who's doing what and how does this work and what are these roles? And so we're, like you said, constantly balancing and figuring out what's my role today? Where do I stand? How do I show up as a man? How does my wife show up or my lady? And how do we make this thing work?
Yeah. Well, and in the West, not all the time, but many times, just in terms of our ability to expand and be on the cutting edge of different ways of showing up and living, et cetera, technology wise, et cetera, you're going to find some discomfort. And it doesn't mean that, all the old stuff was bad either, right? But it doesn't mean that we need to go back there. We have to move forward and continue to integrate, right? We need to continue to integrate what's the new way of being as maybe in some of the older traditions. When again, going back to martial arts, when I had my school, one of the things we said is we taught traditional martial arts with a modern approach, right? So I think that there's a marriage that can happen there because there's some things from a traditional standpoint that are amazing and some things that aren't, and vice versa.
you were a national taekwondo champion. The semifinal round you won with a hook kick to the back of somebody's head. Dude, I finally got the story right. It wasn't the finals. It was the semifinals.
The semifinals, yep.
Semifinals. But either way, you've been in some, even if they were competition and staged, you've been in some fights.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And where I'm going with that is, I wonder if we forget that part of life is a sparring match with life itself. Mm-hmm. In terms of when you get into that match, you ain't surprised when the guy across from you punches you in the face, because that's why you're there. Like, that's the point. It's not a surprise when somebody puts their foot up in the air next to you getting a heel or whatever in your throat. But maybe our lives, I don't know if it's conditioning or if it's just, we bubble wrap our expectations or what, but maybe we just forget that life is a sparring match, and sometimes you're going to take a kick to the mouth. Sometimes you're going to take a kick to the nuts, but at the same time, it's not about getting down. It's about getting up. And so maybe we forget that sometimes.
Well, I think we do. And I think the other thing that we forget is this. We live in a technological age now, and I've thought about this a lot, actually. When you think about all of the technology that we have in our lives today, our computers, our air conditioning, in our homes, our automobiles, et cetera, most things that were developed from a technological standpoint have been developed in order to provide greater comfort and help us to overcome difficulties, right? And so it's the irony for me is that we are on this evolutionary path about trying to be in greater comfort, and as human beings, I think that most of the times when we're happiest is when we are dealing with an exciting challenge, right? When we're dealing with something. Now, there's a sweet spot there. It's not something that's not challenging enough where it allows us to be bored, and it's not something that's so challenging that it overwhelms us. But if we're in a place where we have a challenge in front of us that we can sink our teeth into, I happen to believe that's when we're happiest as human beings, and particularly men. And I'll add to that, I want you to think about the times that you're probably most proud of in your life. And it's probably the times when you had to overcome a challenge and you got out of it on the other side. So, Ryan Holiday, who's the Stoic philosopher, he talks about the obstacle being the way, right? It's not something that's in our way. It's something that is the way. So when we have these challenges in front of us, and I'm not saying it's easy to do, it's a simple concept, but it's not easy. But when we can, as men, embrace those as challenges versus difficulties that are making us look weak or that we can't overcome, and we can look at it as a challenge that we can sink our teeth into, now we can almost gamify it, right? And now it's something that becomes something that gets our juices flowing and gets our heart pumping, because now we can move into that masculine strength versus being pushed down by it.
Yeah, that's an awesome. I know Tony Robbins talks a lot about that, about needing the challenge and needing we as humans, we have the need for surety and uncertainty. Yeah. We need to know that the roof's not going to fall on our head, but we also, need to have a little bit of uncertainty for the excitement. Right. And so it's that paradox of humanity, even where it's not even just men. It's just, we need both things. We need to have certainty and uncertainty. We need to have challenges and easy things, but also when we talk about the paradox of masculinity, I think we'll probably dig more into it here in the fourth quarter, but it's really interesting how most men, and you can really speak to this because you spent your life doing this, but training men to be quote unquote dangerous, training men to be strong, training men how to defend themselves, how to be a protector and all that. Those are usually the men that are the most vulnerable, that are the most grounded and centered. And on the alternative, a lot of the most loudmouth and threatening and these guys that might be trying to do that I'm the alpha male thing and be the boss, but they tend to be usually the most scared and fearful because they haven't put that time in. It's the old, you'd rather be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war sort of concept. And so we've got about a minute left. You have a couple nuggets of that before we really dive into it?
Yeah, I sure do. There's a verse in the Bible. Jesus says, the meek shall inherit the earth. And what I've done through my studies, I've realized that translation from Greek didn't mean the person that was passive and that was unassuming. It meant the person that had power and had strength, but only used it when they needed to, and was able to walk a life of compassion and courtesy and respect toward others. So when I look at the word meek from that perspective, I go, man, I want to embody that. Because in martial arts, I've seen that the biggest, the most dangerous guys are the ones that are the most unassuming, but there's something there because they don't feel like they have to talk the big game. They don't have to, make someone feel lesser than in order for them to feel better. They're comfortable within their own skin. Then that those are the guys that have true, authentic power.
Well, we are going to meekly take ourselves our last break.
Okay.
We're the Mad Men of Masculinity. This is KLDC, and we'll be right back. That was awesome. I like that.
Good. Hey, I got a digital watch now, so I got a stopwatch too.
Oh, check you out. I'm still just using the phone. So how do you want to finish out, Chris? You got anything you want to promote or
something plug? I have 3 common responses to that I was going to go over that I'm going to be sharing, and maybe the ways of overcoming, but how most men deal with it. And the paradox is avoidance, resistance, and resignation. And getting back to that point of the first step in transformation is awareness. It might be good. And then maybe talk a little bit about how they can get on the other side of that, which is, through acceptance, through leaning in, and through being intentional. So maybe we can kind of wrap it up with that.
I love it. Let's do that.
All right, here we go. Fourth quarter time. It is back. We are Mad Men of Masculinity, KLDC. Man, we got our guy. We got our Obi-Wan Kenobi in the building tonight, man. The one and only former national Taekwondo champion, 9th degree black belt. If you are in the Denver metro area and you or one of your kids are somewhere in the martial arts world, you've probably seen this guy, know this guy. You're probably kind of up under his coaching tree, as they call it. He is the big kahuna. He's the one around here. He's our guy, Chris Natzke. Hey, before we even get into it, before we even try to squeeze it in at the end, is there an easy way folks can get a hold of you? I mean, there's some corporate speakers, schedulers out there and people who just want some coaching and to know more about you. How can folks get a hold of you?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking, Kirk. Yeah, they simply can go to my website, chrisnatzke.com. So you see there on the bottom, you've got my name. Just put those 2 words together, www.chrisnatzke.com. You can go there. You can see all about my programs. There's some nice videos on there, talks about, demonstrates what I do. And then if you want to have a discussion, just go ahead and click the button and we'll set up a time to talk.
Boom.
That's amazing. Yeah, Chris has got one of the best corporate team building exercises. I mean, there's boards, there's splinters, there's sawdust, there's yelling. There's all kinds of stuff going on. You got to hire this guy for that, if nothing else.
Right on.
Yeah, no doubt. You even did that in my living room one time.
I did.
For a teen rite of passage that we did, man. And so speaking from the guy that's obviously been having a therapy session here tonight, that would be me. How do guys get on the other side of this masculine paradox?
Well, it's such a great question. And, I've been thinking a lot about this, obviously in preparation for our 823 summit. The first thing, and we've already talked about this, is to have awareness to it. And I think there's 3 things that men do to stay stuck on the other side of the masculine paradox. Is number 1, they tend to avoid. We tend to avoid. We avoid conversations. We avoid leaning into the pain. We avoid being able to really look at ourselves. And it's easy to do that because there's so many distractions that we have in our lives, right? But if you look at where relationships, particularly our most important relationships, tend to go off center, it's when we're avoiding dealing with ourselves so that we can show up to be the best form of ourselves in that relationship. because avoidance happens because leaning into things like this is not comfortable. If you have a choice, you probably wouldn't want to do it. Just like if you're trying to get in shape, you probably don't want to do push-ups, but sometimes you got to do the push-ups. So the first thing is be aware and be conscious of where you may be avoiding some of these things. The next thing is we tend as men to resist. We resist very powerfully. A lot of times it's because we've done it in a certain way our whole lives. It feels comfortable, it feels safe, and we're just going to continue to go down. And like they say, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you always got. And so we tend to be resistant, particularly to change and up-leveling. And so are there places in your life that you're resisting? And when you're doing that, particularly inside yourself, it's probably, for what I've realized, it's the greatest way for me to sap my strength. If I'm resisting something because I'm fearful, because I'm being stubborn about it, that's going to sap my strength. And then the final thing is be aware of where you might be just resigned. It's like, oh man, I just can't get this through. Well, the fact of the matter is there's always those challenges that are in front of us are there. If you look at them from a perspective that they're there to help us grow, then there has to be something on the other side of it. At least that's my belief system. So do our very best to make sure that we're not in that state of resignation, that we're always saying there's something at the other end. There's something here that I can learn from, I can grow from, I can expand from, I can teach from, and then lean into it so that you can overcome and serve from your experience. So the first thing is that awareness. And then once you're there, then it's about, okay, once I've got these awarenesses, there's also this idea of accepting where you're at. Most people think acceptance is resignation, but it isn't. Acceptance isn't about giving in. It's about giving up the beliefs that no longer serve us. Right? So if there are things that we're thinking about ourselves and belief systems that aren't serving us, when we give those up, they come in the realm of acceptance. Okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I can grow. The other thing, and I've said it a couple of times, is lean into it. Those challenges that we have are there to help us grow. And, I don't know about you, but there's oodles of stories that I've had in teaching martial arts for years about people who have been bullied. And when they stand up to the bully, they lean into that situation. That's when that challenge and that's when that bully generally tends to dissolve. And it doesn't mean you necessarily punch someone in the mouth. What I'm talking about is just standing in your strength, is even as scary as it might be. That's, we know in our self-defense seminars that I teach is that 97% of violent sex offenders, for instance, they will identify the exact same people that they will prey upon just by seeing how they show up energetically and physically. And so I think the same thing happens for us, right? And when we don't lean into those challenges, they're going to keep coming at us because they're there for us to learn from. Okay. And then the final thing is have an intention. Have an intention of the man you want to be, right? How do you want to show up in your relationships? How do you want to show up physically? How do you want to show up spiritually? All those things. Be intentional about the man you want to become. And when you're able to do that, you keep your eye on the prize. Now what happens is you're going to continue, you're moving towards something versus away from something.
I love that. It's like the orienteering for life. You've got to know where you are. You got to know your starting point. You got to know where you are presently, and you got to know where you're going.
That's right.
To even get there, you've got to be able to draw that map and even talk about resigning. I thought of a couple of things, but one of the things that has always struck me was I remember having a conversation with my father before he passed. I think I was in my 20s, and he was asking me what I was doing, and I remember just saying, "Yeah, I'm just trying to find myself." And his response was, "You don't know who you are by now?" And I was like, "No, I'm still working on that." And I think that's part of that, like. We had this thing, especially with our past generations of, a man is this, a man does that, and that's just who he is. And, for me, it was always about, growing and progressing and learning things. And so having that maybe resigned mentality of, well, this is just who I am, sometimes stagnates us into a place where we probably don't want to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I get in trouble comparing myself, to other people. Comparing myself to, in terms of my ability to handle challenges or just my ability to produce or where I perceive myself versus where I perceive other people, and get lost in that comparison in terms of just acceptance, in terms of, playing, swimming in the pool that's my depth kind of thing. To a degree, I thoroughly appreciate Coach Prime, for example. I look at the way he handles challenges, and you got this cancer diagnosis, and had the surgery, and just his outlook. And I'm like, man, why can't I have, why can't I have that outlook? I mean, this guy had cancer, had his bladder removed, and all this other stuff. And, his outlook is totally upbeat, totally positive. And what can I get from this? And, how can I advance, how can I advance my calling and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes I sit back saying, man, that's what I'd love to be. But how come I can't be that right now?
And you bring up a great point, Kirk. And I think that's what's so important about what we're doing on the 23rd of August, and what we do continuously, and what we do in our relationships with each other, is to be around strong men of integrity, right? That are dealing with all those things themselves, but are helping us keep, not from a comparison standpoint, but from a standpoint of, I call it capability. So, there's a big word in the coaching world about accountability, and accountability is oftentimes, hold you accountable because blah, blah, blah. And that can work in many ways, but it can also be a little bit disparaging, right? But if I hold you capable, if you say to me, this is the way that you want to show up in your life, these are the things you want to achieve, and I'm going to hold you capable to that standard, now all of a sudden you've got this network of men that will hold you to that standard and be that support mechanism, knowing that we're all going to stumble, we're all going to fall. But when we've got that, now it's like they always say, the rising tide lifts all boats, right? And, to kind of mix metaphors here, Jim Rohn says we're an average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So when you're spending time with people that, they're dealing with it too, but they're also committed to their growth, their expansion, to being the best men they can be, it helps lift all of us, and it helps us move through some of our toughest times.
I love that. And I think one good thing too, especially having a group of guys around you with different perspectives, with different life paths, with different experiences. I mean, even to that Coach Prime example, I think for him it's much easier to be very positive to these things because he's not in survival mode. He's comfortable. He's going to have enough money to be okay the rest of his life. And for some of us, sometimes it's like, okay, well, I'm still earning a paycheck and dealing with this and doing that. So sometimes it's a little more difficult to have that positive outlook. So it's good to have those references so that when we do get into comparison, we can be like, I'm doing pretty good with what I got. I'm still kicking butt. I'm still, taking names. So.
Yeah. And, Jason, I would venture to say too, I don't know this for a fact, but I'd venture to say that he was on the phone with some buddies when he was going through what he was going through, right?
Yeah.
He had people that were helping pick him up. And so, I just want to say that to all the men out there. We have this, all through our folklore, the Lone Ranger, right? We've got the individual rugged man, et cetera, et cetera. And doggone it, there is strength in that. There is strength in self-sufficiency and self-reliance. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, there's also power in being able to lean on someone when you need some help to help you, right, move through those challenges and to help hold you capable of the man you were born to be.
That's why it's important to have a circle of guys. I mean, that's why it's important to, whatever station you are in life, whatever, economic level you are, whatever professional level you are, whatever age you are, whatever it is, for us guys, it's more important than ever, I think, for us to not find ourselves in the solo land. Even the Lone Ranger had Tonto, right? So, for us to not try to do this thing together, to climb the mountain alone. Nobody climbs Everest by themselves, right? And those that do peel off end up, being a frozen body on the side of the mountain.
That's right.
And so, that again, it's a reminder of why we venture to do the Men's Summit. I'm going to plug it, Men's Summit. August 23rd, Parker, Colorado, at the Parker Schoolhouse, and maybe JBK can throw a comment up there, but with the address, but it's bmen.org/summit is where you find info and get tickets and that kind of stuff. But that's why we do this. we do this stuff because we're all going through ups and downs, and none of us have made it, quote unquote. Like Coach Prime, we don't have NFL Hall of Famers calling us, and but that's where he is. He is an NFL, right? So he has his circle of friends reaching out to him and and supporting him and all that kind of stuff, and that's why we're doing this to advance that whole idea of us doing this thing together, man. And that's why we're passionate about what we do. So.
And we love you and we thank you. Make sure you like and subscribe. Go check out Grandmaster Chris Natzke. Go to his website. Go to our website. Come tell us how much you love us, and tell us how you like these faces for radio. And until next time, we are the Mad Men of Masculinity. That's Chris Natzke, and we are out.